So perhaps you're considering joining the United States Army and you want to know, can I take my dog Spot? Can I take Mittens? Can I take my cat Fluffy McFlufferface? Well, let's talk about it. What's up, my friends? U.S. Army veteran Christopher Chaos, and today we're talking about, can I have pets in the Army? And it's not as straightforward as a yes or no answer, really. There are some different scenarios that definitely play a part. So I want to be able to kind of explain some situations where yes, you can have pets, and situations where no, you can't have pets, because there are different kind of scenarios where that really depends as far as having pets or not having pets. Now, of course, with pretty much almost all of my content, I'm talking about active duty Army here. If you're in the reserves, the National Guard, well, it doesn't really matter. Nobody really cares if you have pets or not, because you're just doing weekend duty and occasionally some 2-week duties, so that's on you, kind of a thing. But when you're on active duty, there are a lot of different restrictions that play a factor in here, so that's why it depends. So in a situation when you can't have pets is being a single soldier because you live in the barracks. At basically every Army installation, they usually have this pet policy of no pets type of thing. I don't think I've ever heard of any Army installation that has barracks where they're like, sure, you can have pets. That'd be really rare if there was a situation like that. But for the most part, if you're gonna be a single soldier, you're gonna be living in the barracks. So that means that you can't have pets. The exception with that would be officers, because officers don't live in the barracks, but we'll talk about that a little bit later and how that kind of works. But in the barracks, they're not allowed to have pets. There are situations I've seen where people try to get away with having pets. But let me explain why it is that if you're gonna be living in the barracks as a single soldier, you can't have pets. The reason for that is, let's say you have, a training exercise coming up. You're gonna be gone for a week, 2 weeks. Maybe you're going to the National Training Center where you're gone for a month. Who's gonna take care of that pet while you're gone? They don't have like pet daycare in the barracks or in the Army for you to take care of that. I mean, sure, you possibly, if you had family in the area, you happen to be stationed at that kind of location, then you could do that. But there's also a lot of other factors too with why they don't want pets in the barracks. Sometimes, those barracks are really small, so that can cause smelling issues, and maybe your roommate's allergic to pets and they don't want to have to try to match you up with someone who's not allergic to dogs or allergic to cats to make sure to accommodate you to be able to have Fluffy living in the barracks with you. So that's probably another reason as well. I'm sorry to say it, sometimes when you have a brand new private that knows nothing but living with their parents because that's what they're doing in high school, and now they're put into this situation, they might not have good judgment for how to take care of a pet. So it definitely probably would be a situation where that young private who doesn't know any better is just gonna assume that they can just leave out a bunch of food for Fluffy while they're gone to the field for a week and then hope all is good, and you come back and Fluffy, starved to death because there wasn't enough food, or shit all over the place, or who knows what, right? So they don't want to worry about those scenarios. I've seen people try to get away with different things. I've seen people get away with a fish, which sure, you might be able to get away with it. It's still probably not something that's allowed, so probably if you got caught with having that fish, you probably still could possibly get in trouble. Maybe your leadership is lenient enough, they're like, I don't really give a crap, it's a fish. But definitely situations like dogs and cats, yeah, that's not something you're really gonna be able to get away with. I'm sure there's stories of people that try to and maybe even are successful, but there are reasons why they don't want you having that situation. There is no acceptable pet that's allowed. Maybe they wouldn't care about an ant farm, but they might even still, gig you on having an ant farm, saying no, nothing completely type of thing. There's not really any specific pet that I've ever heard of that they make exceptions for in the barracks. So if you want to have a pet, you're single, you're gonna be living in the barracks, so no pets. I don't want to hear about it in the questions. What about an iguana? What about a squirrel? What if I have sea monkeys? Well, maybe sea monkeys, but pretty much any kind of pet, no, you can't have a pet in the barracks. Some other situations when you can't have pets is gonna be like on a deployment. It doesn't matter if it's combat deployment, non-combat deployment, they don't let you take pets with you on these deployments. So you're not gonna be able to have your pet cat, dog, whatever, go with you on these deployments, whether it's a combat or non-combat deployment. Even though you may have heard stories of people having like pet dogs in Iraq or Afghanistan or something like that, that's probably usually like a local dog that was in the area, not something they brought with them. In those cases, you're still not really allowed to have that, but sometimes, hey, you're on some remote fob, some remote installation or whatever, leadership probably doesn't really care too much, then sure, maybe you're getting away with having a pet dog because it was a stray dog from the area. Yeah, sure, maybe kind of a thing, but don't think that you're gonna be able to bring some pets with you when you go on these deployments. Now, a situation that gets a little bit kind of tricky with having pets is when you get stationed overseas, because a lot of times those different locations have different policies as far as pets and how it has to work, and while being a married soldier will probably allow you to bring a pet, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later as far as like how married soldiers can have pets in certain circumstances, but If you're a single soldier, it doesn't change, right? Just because you're going overseas doesn't suddenly make it to where you're allowed to have pets, because you're still gonna be probably living in barracks when you go overseas, so you still can have pets. But a married soldier, right, and they wanna bring their pet with them to Germany, to Korea, to Japan, whatever the overseas duty assignment is, technically, yes, they probably could. But sometimes it's just a scenario where people don't kind of want to hassle with it, because there is a little bit extra work you have to do if you're in that situation. Usually with those situations, you have to make sure that you have proper documentation for that local area of what the requirements are for having a pet coming from overseas, proper immunizations, all sorts of other things, a proper checkup from a veterinarian to say that this animal is safe for travel. There's also a lot of times like a quarantine kind of period where when the pet travels and they arrive, they have to be quarantined for a certain amount of time. So it's not a pretty common thing. I mean, it does happen. People do bring their pets with them to these overseas assignments, but in some situations, maybe it's just too much work. Maybe the dog's too old, the cat's too old, whatever, and so they can't really bring it. So overseas, assignments as far as, being stationed over there, not being deployed over there, but being stationed overseas, and you're married, possibly would allow you to bring a pet as long as it is authorized for that location. But there usually is a lot of work, and some people, for whatever reason, may not want to kind of go with that, and it just kind of has to be really up to you as far as, can you get the documentation? Is it safe for this animal to travel based on their age, and a lot of other factors. So sometimes you'll see it where people don't. I have seen times where people will maybe get a pet, maybe they're stationed in Germany and they got a cat or a dog while they're in Germany and then brought it back. But sometimes, a lot of factors kind of fall into place with whether or not they are going to bring a pet from the United States to an overseas tour or duty assignment. You can, but there's usually a lot of extra work that goes along with it, so it depends on your situation. So yes, you can have pets if you are married, but there is still some buts in there. Let's start off with an example. You're a married soldier and your spouse is not in the military and you want to live on post. On-post housing a lot of times will have pet restrictions. I've seen some installations where they don't allow large dogs, they don't allow certain breeds of dogs, those kinds of things, or certain other types of pets where they might have some kind of policy on, and that really might vary based on that local installation as far as what their pet policy is for housing. So that's always a thing. You just kind of have to do a little research if you're going to be going to a specific installation and seeing what the pet policy is for living on post, to see what it is, so that way you know whether or not you're going to be able to have that pet living on base. So that can be a little bit tricky. Now, if you are married and you live off post, well, then it's just gonna be based on like the apartment complex, the housing area, whatever that you're living in as far as what their pet policy is. So you might have a little bit more flexibility to live in off post with pets, depending on what the pet is. Now, in the scenario that you are in the military and your spouse is also in the military, you can still have pets. There's no policy saying that because you're both in the military you can't have pets, but you do have a little bit of planning you have to be able to do. So let's say that you have a dog, right, kind of as an example, and you're both in the military and you're both gonna be going on a deployment or both going on a field exercise for a couple weeks or whatever. You gotta have a plan to have something to do with that pet, because you're not gonna be able to get out of that training exercise because you're like, sorry, First Sergeant, I can't go on this training exercise because we got our dog Spot at home and we're both going to the field, so one of us has to stay behind and take care of our dog. No, that's not gonna be a legitimate excuse to get you out of that training exercise, deployment, nothing. So as a married couple, both being in the military, you're gonna have to have some sort of plan for what you will do in those kind of events where you both are not gonna be available to take care of that pet, because having a pet is not an excuse, will not get you out of training, deployment, nothing. Kind of similar is like higher ranking individuals or officers that don't have to live in the barracks, right? Officers don't live in the barracks, so they usually choose to either live on post housing if it's available or go live off post. And yeah, you can, because you live out of the barracks, right? You can have pets, but you're also gonna be in that category where you have to have a plan, because you're not gonna be able to get out of a training deployment or training exercise, whatever, because you have a pet. So still along those same lines where you're gonna have to have some kind of plan for who's gonna take care of your pet in the event that you have to go off for a week or more or whatever for some kind of training exercise. So I said there's not really a cut and dry yes or no answer, and you kind of see that, but I mean, one kind of close way to kind of look at it is if you're a single soldier that's gonna be living in the barracks, no, you can't have pets. If you are a married soldier, then yes, most likely, with possibly some limitations. So you can kind of keep it in mind in that way, but it's still not really like a cut and dry yes or no whether or not you can have pets in the Army. I mean, you could still be a single soldier, but don't live in the barracks. So probably the barracks is like one of the more key things for a single soldier. If you live off post, like I was in a situation where I was an NCO, I chose not to live in the barracks. I just paid out of my own pocket to live off post, and I actually had 2 cats myself. So I just fell into that category of I needed some kind of plan to have a way to take care of my pets if I went on an exercise to go do training, and which I did. I had family that lived in the area, so I had a way that I was able to, you know, pass off my 2 cats that I had at the time off to, you know, a family relative if I was gonna be gone for some training. So if you're in that situation, just because you're single doesn't necessarily mean you can't have pets. It's more of the single and live in the barracks can't have pets. But don't think that you're gonna be some brand new private and be like, okay, well, cool, I'll just, you know, won't live in the barracks. I'll bring my dog with me kind of a thing and live out of the barracks. No, if you're a private, you probably can't afford to live outside the barracks, and leadership might not even allow you to do that in the first place. You usually still have to have permission to live outside of the barracks if you're not otherwise in those categories of being like married or something. So just kind of keep that in mind. Down in the comment section, if you currently have a pet, I'd love to hear what kind of pet you have and what their names are, kind of a thing. And if you don't have a pet, then what do you think would be a cool pet to have? And I'd like to hear its name, because we gotta comment something. We gotta feed that YouTube algorithm, so leave a comment down below and help me out. That way the maybe video gets recommended to other people. If you don't know me myself, I actually have 2 pets. I got 2 dogs. I got a small dog named Zod, and then I also have a larger dog named Clutch. Now hold up, I know you're thinking about clicking on to the next video or moving on to something else, but before you do so, think about maybe checking out these videos over here. I got this guy right here that YouTube says that you probably should check out because it's recommending it to you, and then we also have my latest video upload right there. Links down in the description box for social media, Discord channel, all that kind of fun stuff. Hit that thumbs up. I'm Christopher Chaos. I'll see you next time. See ya.